Surveillance capitalism. Okay, so most of us understand that, capitalism has evolved over the centuries. And even though there are some enduring principles of capitalism, it takes different forms in different eras, depending on the technology and the state of society and so forth. So what's happened in our era, in the digital century, is a new presentation of capitalism, a new economic logic, a new way of creating wealth. So let me explain what that is. One of the enduring principles of capitalism is that it evolves by taking things that live outside the marketplace, outside the domain of market exchange, and it brings them into the marketplace. And it turns them into things that we call commodities, things that can be sold and purchased. Okay, yes. So I think most of us understand industrial capitalism, which dominated the 19th and 20th centuries. Industrial capitalism took nature from outside the marketplace and it brought it in and it turned it into things that we call land, things we call real estate, forests that could be purchased and sold, rivers that were repurposed as sources of power that could be sold and purchased. So nature became commodified, and that is what drove industrial capitalism and allowed it to create so much wealth. Okay, now fast forward into the digital century, the 21st century. Capitalism is scanning the horizon, looking for what is the new source of raw materials, the new source of free assets that we can turn into commodities. And what it hit upon was us, private human experience.
The information that we provide is the least important part of the information that they collect about us. Back in the year 2000, 2001, 2002, back in those days, these data were considered just extra data. They were considered waste material. Eventually, it was understood that these so-called waste materials harbored these rich predictive data. The companies like to say, we collect data so that we can improve our service. But even more of it is analyzed to train what they call models. And that allows me to fit your data right into that arc and to predict what you're likely to do, not only now, but soon and later. Sell that prediction, auction that prediction to their business customers in the restaurant business, who will then send you a very quick ad. It's easy for us to say, oh, these things don't affect me. The fact is, this is being conducted at a layer that is not accessible to us. They use information from our faces, which we've given billions and billions of photos to Facebook to train models for facial recognition. Those models are then sold to military operations, some of them in China. And those Chinese operations do many things, including imprisoning the Uyghur, a subset of the Uyghur Muslim population in China, in what is rightly regarded as an open-air prison. Important to understand that Pokemon Go is an augmented reality game that was incubated, developed inside Google. Is a game that precisely emulates the logic of surveillance capitalism. Now, in the real world, business customers paid Niantic Labs not for click-through, but for the real-world equivalent of click-through, which is called footfall. All of these establishments, they're buying what are called, here's the term, lure modules, that lure people to you. Not so that they will come and be happy, but so they will come and spend money in your shop. Starbucks, McDonald's, everybody was making money. And the people playing the game had no idea. Using remote control means to automate behavior, to engineer behavior, to fulfill others' commercial ends. That the Nest security system has a microphone, does not figure in any schematic. So what better device to extract behavioral surplus, especially new forms, voices, conversations, what you're watching on television. What happens is the thermostat collects data, it sends those data to third parties, and those third parties send data to third parties ad infinitum, an infinite regress, where your data is going goodness knows where. And no company takes responsibility for what the third parties that it's sending your data to may do with your data. So they start extracting data at scale. It's not just volume, but it's different qualities of data. Now you had Google making money on the basis of what I call the surveillance dividend. Now, what venture capitalist wants to invest in a firm that's, just making an app, when it can invest in a firm that's making an app plus the surveillance dividend? Why bother to put all that effort into the engineers and the factories and the science to make a car that runs without carbon, when all we need to do is sell the data from the darn vehicles, and we've got the surveillance dividend? We want everybody to have a phone, because the more they have the phone and the more they spend time on the phone, the more data we get from them. So this is a document written by Facebook executives in Australia, and what they told their business customers there was that we have so much data about 6.6 million Australian young adults and teenagers. As a result of that, we can predict mood shifts. We can predict when they feel stressed, fatigued, anxious, inferior, that we could understand their inner demons. And we could figure out how to target those demons. And by triggering those emotions, we could then manipulate them into clicking on a website, joining a group, telling them what kind of things to read, telling them what kind of people to hang out with, even telling them who to vote for. And there will come a time when, even in the West, even in our democratic societies, our government will be tempted to annex these capabilities and use them over us and against us. We have privacy laws, and the GDPR is the furthest frontier of our privacy laws. We still need more. GDPR talks a lot about data ownership, data accessibility, and data portability. But as we have seen, most of the data that they use to feed into the factories, to produce the predictions, these are data that we haven't given. They analyzed the data, they made it into products, they sold the products, and they took the profit. Illegitimate profit. These 20 years have been the honeymoon for surveillance capitalism, because they have been 20 years largely unimpeded by law. Just like factories employing children, in a mass production factory. There hadn't been anything like that before, and there were no laws against it. We haven't even tried yet to stop it. Look, surveillance capitalism is 20 years old. Democracy is several centuries old. I bet on democracy.